To mount a body shell is a time-consuming and fairly difficult task, and for the X12 it's not an exception. So in this video I'll explain the steps that I follow to mount my body shells on my X12. So to mount the body shell we have a clear Protoform AMR body shell here, ready to be mounted. It's of course a lot easier to mount the body when it's clear. So my tip is to give the body to your painter after you've already done the holes. That will make your life a lot easier later on. So what we need to do here is we need to mark the spots for the body posts. What you need is a black Sharpie and a caliper. The caliper is going to be your best friend in this process. I usually mount my AMR around 3 to 4 millimeters forward, which I know from previous experience that there's a certain distance that I'm looking for then. First of all, I'm going to try to line up the body so that it's straight in between the front wheels, and then I'm going to measure the distance here between the center of the body post to the top of the front air intake. As you can see, it's 26 millimeters. It's going to mark the holes here. Alright, that's the first step. One thing to keep in mind with these bodies is that they're not completely symmetrical. So I've measured this distance here, I've shown you, is 26. It's 26 millimeters from the center of the post to the top of the air intake. But they're not symmetrical in the sense that the body posts are not gonna be completely centered, even though the wheels are centered in the car. This is simply because of the shape of the body shell. Because my body posts, I know they're completely straight, but we still have 19 millimeters here, 20.5 here between the center of the post to this little edge here in the body shell. But don't worry about that. If the wheels lined up, then that distance is fine, because the body shell is asymmetrical. We're now gonna move on to marking, first of all, making the front holes, and then we're gonna mark the rear holes. Be very careful when you make the holes in these lightweight body shells, because they're very thin and it's easy to push the reamer through too far and rip the body shell apart. Be very careful, especially if your reamer is brand new. This is a Hoodie small body reamer, which is really good, really sharp, and does the job perfectly. So when the front holes are done, the easiest way to then make the rears is actually to turn the car towards yourself and look at it from the back. I then try to look like this, try and center the body shell over the rear of the car. Make sure your track width is set before you do this, to have the same track width left and right, so that you don't confuse yourself with the centering. And when that is done, simply mark the holes, mark the spots for the holes. Now the spots are marked for the rear post as well, and we'll bring out the caliper, and once again you'll see a difference in distance between left and right. There's about 20.4 here, and I measure from the edge of the side of the body shell to the center of the hole, around 19 here. But that's completely fine, because I know that from previous experience that the body shell is not symmetrical, also in the rear. So these two spots need to be asymmetrical, otherwise the body will not sit straight on the car. Okay, now this is all done. Fits perfectly here, and I'm gonna go and paint this body shell before we cut out the wheel wells and adjust the height perfectly. Just one tip for cutting out the rear of the body shell. I usually cut this spot here under the rear wing as high as I can. I try to leave a bit of a corner here, both sides, to maintain some rigidity of the body shell so it doesn't break so easily, but it's important to cut this as high as possible to maximize the aerodynamic effect of the body shell. That's all done. The body shell is painted up in my signature fluorescent green color. What I'm then going to show you is the front lip height. I usually set my car to be 6.5 to 7 millimeters clear of the ground under the front lip on European carpet, whereas on CRC black carpet in the US you need to have more clearance, normally 7.5 to even 8 millimeters, depending on the specific track you're at. Because on CRC black carpet, the front lip is gonna drag more, and it can really give you some handling problems. So make sure you have at least 7.5 millimeters of clearance on CRC black carpet. And for European carpet, 6.5 to 7 normally is just fine. You can maybe go even lower for racing in the stock class on certain tracks. To cut out the wheel wells, I usually do it like this. I put the wheels lined up with the wheels of the car. You can actually see them. You can see them through the body shell, but you can also see them below the body shell, so it's easy to line them up like this. And then I cut them out with a curved scissor. But before we do that, we can actually talk about the rear height of the body shell. I usually measure the point here, the highest point of the body shell, to the ground. And the distance here that we're looking for is for CRC black carpet, so for very high grip, I try to have it at 80 millimeters of height, which is fairly low. This distance needs to be higher for racing on European carpet. Normally 3 millimeters higher, so 83 millimeters. So keep this in mind when you mount the body shell, that for CRC black carpet, this distance here needs to be around 80, even 79 if you need even less downforce to free up the car on very high grip. And for European carpet, you need to have it taller to generate more downforce, to create more of a rake effect in the body shell, to make it more aerodynamically efficient and to generate more grip. But raising the rear of the body shell will make the car understeer more. You'll have less steering but more overall grip. So the car will be less free, but it will have more grip. Okay, with the wheel wells cut out, I will now utilize my Protoform sanding drum on my Dremel tool to make the wheel wells perfectly round. Once that's done, we have perfectly round wheel wells, and that's it. I mean, body is mounted straight, front lip is set at the correct height. This particular body shell here is mounted for racing on black carpet, on CRC black carpet, so it's 7.5 millimeters of height in the front. The rear height of the body shell is 80 millimeters. The wheels have good clearance, and it's ready to go racing. Just a quick remark about the Mon-tech M20 body shell. I chose to use the Protoform AMR as the example because it's the body shell that I use the most, but a lot of people also use the Mon-tech M20, and the same principle apply really. The front lip height is the same. I set it up the same for the M20. The difference is the rear height. The M20 needs to be run very high in the rear. Usually for European carpet I run it 85 millimeters of height in the rear. So about 2 millimeters higher than the AMR. The M20 needs to be run higher. That's why you can also see here I'm running a lot of shims under the body post, actually 10 millimeters of shims, to be able to reach that height. I also mounted slightly forward, 3 to 4 millimeters. As you can see here, there's a bit of room left in front of the wheel, in the wheel well. And it's actually quite easy to mount the M20 centered because you have these pre-marked lines in the body shell. You can actually see them here, which you can use as indicators for making the holes. So the holes don't go straight on them, they actually go right next to them, but you can use the lines as good indicators for centering the holes. So that's it. I think I've covered most important bits about mounting the body shell for the X12 and for the X12'21 in particular.